Rosie Batty, it's great to have you here at Booktopia.
Thank you.
Just wondering, who is Rosie Batty today as opposed to the Rosie Batty of, say, a year ago? A lot has happened to you this past 12 months. So are you the same person?
Yes, I really think I am. I think I'm still that same person that's always been down to earth, forthright, honest, emotional, thoughtful, reflective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think anything's changed. I am bemused and surprised constantly that people know who I am. I'm still grateful for people stopping me and saying, "You're doing a great job, we think you're wonderful." I still really seek that reassurance. I haven't by any means become
cynical or sort of media weary or any of that.
I think, the only challenge for me is really the challenge of saying no, the challenge of actually having to decline something I'd really like to do because of the person who's asked me. I really find it difficult to say no, because nearly everything that I am asked, I really like to be able to do it.
Well, not only that, but because of the topic, it really matters.
That's
so
right.
It must be very difficult to say no. I'm just wondering, though, Rosie, what you've discovered about yourself in writing a mother's story, because you say you're the same person, but generally when people write a book about themselves, about an episode in their lives, they do find out something about themselves. So what have you found out about yourself?
I think what I've found out through the book, through having to reflect, because people ask me and continue to ask me, where do you get your courage from? How can you continue to do what you're doing after the death of Luke? So I think that it's made me really reflective and really understand very, very deeply that when I lost my mum as a 6-year-old little girl, that has given me my life skills that I've developed over a lifetime, which absolutely help me now.
Because one of the things that I find really interesting is there's a little bit in the book where you say that up until now you have not been inconsolable, that you have been able to kind of carry on to an extraordinary degree without losing it. And you say that the body is a strange thing, and that you talked, I think, to the wonderful woman who was caught in the London bombings, who said that her body only kind of surrendered to the sort of pain and grief of what had happened to her when she lost her legs in that terrible explosion 7 years on. So is there a sense in which you're kind of almost waiting for the shock to really hit you?
Look, I just think this is an unknown journey. No one can predict. No one can tell you how you're going to be. Everybody's journey through grief is completely unique. What other people do at the beginning isn't necessarily what I did or have done. And I've always felt really comfortable that if there is a point at any time I want to bail out, I will just do that. And what I think is part of, what I've learned over my life is, whether it's healthy or it's not healthy, to just push on. And it's a skill that I've learned. And I don't know whether that means in the future that will be harmful, or whether it's been served me and will equip me for future. I think time will tell. Time will tell. And I just think that at the end of the day, you're human, you do the best you can, and you grieve in the way that feels right at that time. And so that's where I just keep navigating this journey, that no one can tell you how to be. People try to say to you, you need to make time to grieve. And I think, what do you mean by that? Because let me tell you, do you mean I need to stay at home, closed windows, and just, what do I do to make time to grieve?
Like?
Yes. And actually, it's not pleasant. Feeling pain is not pleasant.
Other people's ideas of what the behaviour of grief is are very old-fashioned and very traditional ideas that sort of go back to the way people mourned when they were in the Victorian age, and we in the modern age maybe have a different notion. From what you've said there, though, that's really about your conscious self kind of pushing through.
Yes.
I'm wondering about your unconscious self,
Yes.
and whether I can ask you a sort of a more personal question, which is whether you ever dream of Luke,
Oh, yes.
whether you ever dream of Greg.
It's interesting because I think of Luke all of the time, whether I know I am or I'm not. Unless I'm talking and distracted about something, my thoughts are always thinking of Luke. Particular times of year, I've realised that my dreams are more intense about Luke. And what's really horrible is waking up from a dream and realising the reality is worse than the dream, or the reality, normally when you have a bad dream, you wake up and you go, oh, thank God. This time I wake up and there is no, this is not a dream. This has really happened. And, it takes a long time to really accept the finality. There is still elements that you still find yourself finding it hard to believe of how final it is. And look, I just think that there are many cultures that know how to grieve far better than we do. What we tend to do is not allow anyone unpleasant feelings. We can't tolerate anger, we can't tolerate sadness. If anyone says to you, how are you? They want you to say, I'm fine. We really don't know how to support people very, very well who are really struggling. Because, that's my journey too. Some people are very confronted. I'm not always upbeat, calm, demure, eloquent, and all of these lovely things that people describe. I mean, sometimes I feel embarrassed because I think, well, that's me on a good day. Catch me on a day when I'm overwhelmed, tired, and feel that the demands on me are too much. There are moments where I don't handle things as well, and I do respond very emotionally or angrily, and those core people who I can trust to support me no matter what are incredibly valuable to me. So, this is a journey for me about myself, and none of us are perfect. None of us have got it all worked out. This is just another period of my life, which I've always been open, I've always been honest, I've always tried to understand either myself or the people close to me or the world. I always seek to try to understand. So, this is, so I haven't changed. I think, in one way, it's catapulted me to push through a fear of failure, to push through, to challenge myself in a way that I would have talked myself out of before, because I wouldn't have felt I was good enough, or I would have felt that I'd fail. And so, by really the media being so supportive of my journey and being so respectful to me, it's given me greater confidence.
But then do you think that at the end of the time of being Australian of the Year, when some of that spotlight is withdrawn, that maybe that's going to be harder? Because at the moment you're sort of buoyed in a way by this incredible attention and empathy and compassion and also respect. You are constantly being asked to comment, so you've become a kind of, unwilling authority on a subject. When all of that is taken away, when all of that oxygen is withdrawn, do you think, gosh, what's that going to be like?
I don't think it will. I think I was really busy and fully as busy as I could need to be before I became Australian of the Year. It is a topical issue. It is an issue that people are starting to understand needs to be addressed. I think, certainly some women, not just victims, and a lot of young girls, and I've identified with me as a role model, which initially I was quite surprised about and very flattered and bemused. But I understand, it's really difficult for us to have strong women role models, and it's really important for young girls to aspire to admire somebody, and whether I feel I'm worthy of that has been I suppose something I can
because I am Australian of the Year, I was very conflicted about that too, because I felt, again, I didn't deserve it, and other people have done so much more than me, and that's typical of my character as well. But it has helped me really appreciate what it is really like to be recognised. And for this period of my life, to be given this opportunity to feel really in a really privileged position. But, those things aren't real. What's really real to me is when I wake up in the morning and Luke isn't there. What's really real to me are, that it has put pressure on my friendships. It has put pressure on my family. It has changed things. And so that's what's real. So everything for me is bittersweet. It's joy and it's sadness in the same split second. It is hard juggling that. And at times it is, that pressure does come out because I'm used to just getting on with it. So I think for me, I don't seek to be some kind of tragic celebrity. I find it strange. And so for me, what will be next year will be able to continue a lot of this work in a more strategic way. There is no end to the opportunities that have come from this. And I'm really confident that I will be doing some really good work because I've met some very, very amazing people. Not just famous people, not just influential people, but good people. People who care, people who are passionate, people who are focused in making a difference. And that energy, when we work together, I just love it. I just feel so inspired. There is a part of me that needs to be more balanced in that, and I hope to find that balance next year. But this year has been about making the most of this opportunity. Possibly it's given me an opportunity also to distract myself, maybe, get through the worst possible time, to keep feeling a sense of purpose and meaning. I just feel incredibly lucky, to be honest, that I have the strengths and I've had the opportunities, because I'm not the only person that's lost a child over the last year or so.
Indeed not.
I am not the only person that's experienced significant grief and tragedy. We're currently having 2 women a week on average being murdered. Even today, yesterday, we've had, a huge number of people whose lives have been changed forever. This is an epidemic that should have been addressed decades ago, and it's now time for us all to take responsibility and do something about it.
One of the things that I like about your book, you talked before about, about reality, and you've got a very firm grasp on reality. One of the things that really struck me in your book is the honesty with which you talk about how important your financial situation is in these circumstances. I mean, I really got a shock when I read the bit about how when it came to criminal charges against Greg, you couldn't afford a lawyer and you didn't qualify for legal aid. So how important is money in the mix for women in situations where domestic violence is part of their lives?
It's incredibly important, and this is why I am so passionate at advocating for access to justice and women's legal services, because you can be in a very affluent suburb with an amazing lifestyle, and that can change just like that. And the person who controls the finances of the family, you can find yourself homeless and penniless with no choices, and the blame that's associated around you for leaving the family, so financial abuse is incredible, and it really dictates quite often who is, comes out best through a court case. And so I'm very, very, very concerned about how our legal system is becoming unaffordable, and how our government is really not recognising the level of financial abuse and the impact it makes. So I think this is a really significant area that probably, even when people struggle to think of people possibly that are in a violent relationship or have known somebody in a violent relationship, I bet a lot of people can actually relate or think of people who have
been financially affected, either because their ex-partner is refusing to pay child support and contribute to the family and the children, or have gone through the family law court system and have come out, very financially compromised. So I think, a lot of us, even if we haven't recognised that as abuse, I hope that we start to recognise all the different forms of abuse and realise that, these are real reasons, that people can't leave a relationship, or if they do, it's extremely difficult.
What about shame? I'm just wondering how much you think shame is an obstacle or a barrier still. We live in a very open society where a lot of the things that used to be taboos aren't taboo anymore. So you can talk about just about anything, in theory, it seems at times in the media. But do you think that shame about being the victim of domestic violence is still the barrier, that people are too embarrassed to say that they're being hurt in their own home?
Look, I think there is an element of shame, I guess, but I don't know how much of the element of shame is, or an element of being victim blaming. I think that is stronger. So we don't know that we're going to be supported, or we've already been very clearly given messages that you've brought it on yourself. You choose to stay with him, you've made the bed, you lie in it. When you consider through, like my childhood, not that I ever had experienced any violence, because I didn't. And I don't know anyone in my family that did. And so you've got to understand that people don't understand. And so what they think is, it's very simple. The solution is simple. And so, a lot of the people close to you, either your family or your friends, offer simplistic solutions. And really, you feel isolated in the end, because you don't feel that you can speak to them anymore, because they don't understand necessarily how fearful you are, or how much your confidence and self-esteem has been eroded to you really believing that you are to blame. But when we're looking at power and control, it's such a complex, insidious thing to have experienced. And when we're looking at possibly people been experiencing it for years and years, it's very difficult to extricate yourself. A lot of these murders, and Luke's including, they're from people who've been psychologically abusive, not necessarily physically violent. So there is a lot of reasons to be fearful and to not know what may happen when you leave. So sometimes, we feel that people are impatient or lack of understanding, and we really don't know what to do next, because unfortunately when you leave, it doesn't mean that the violence stops. In fact, that can increase, and often does, either from financial abuse, intimidation and stalking and unrelenting. I never lived with Greg. I never married Greg. I had 12 years of abuse from him. And I just had to work out ways so that I could have a good quality of life, that Luke would be a well-adjusted little boy, and not to be bitter, not to be angry, not to let him, drag me down. And he did at times. He absolutely did at times. But, when he murdered Luke, I was extremely strong. And, that's unfortunately, he didn't kill me, he killed my son. This is an act of revenge, as the ultimate act of power and control. So, what's really important for people, I think, is to really have the support of specialised services. And unfortunately, we don't invest in those services, we don't respect those services. And so the journey for a victim when they leave or seek help is very difficult. And it isn't pleasant, and it is a Russian roulette as to whether you get a good supportive policeman or a good supportive police station or a magistrate that understands and doesn't, so on it goes. And so, what I'm working very hard, and not on my own, but with many good people, is that the systems and processes have to improve. And not just
because of financial investment, because of their attitudes. You know, that somehow we are to blame. Somehow we are not to be believed. Somehow the risk of violence is minimised, and the voices of children are not believed either. And so it is a very, very difficult to understand how we have behaved as a society throughout all this time. But now our eyes are starting to be opened and starting to actually question and challenge our attitudes. So we are, I believe, you know, at a point that is very hopeful, but we absolutely, you know, have to continue to push this as a significant issue. You know, if we called it family terrorism, there would be huge resources, and we've just got to recognise that is exactly what it is. We have people in our own communities living around the corner or next door who are not safe, living in terror. And it's not exaggerated either, you know, that is absolutely fact. And it crosses all, you know, barriers, it crosses all areas of society, from the wealthiest to the most poor, across all cultures.
Well, thank you very much for telling it like it is today, Rosie Batty.
Thank you.